Thank you, Senator Grassley, and I hope you'll take that issue up with the Republican leadership.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I sent you a letter signed by the Senate Judiciary Democrats, all of them, requesting that you hold a hearing on the nomination of Ed Martin to serve as U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. As you know, the U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C. is one of the most important and powerful prosecutors in America. This committee does not typically hold hearings for U.S. Attorney nominees, but Mr. Martin's record is so controversial and so objectionable that I feel we must hear from him under oath. Before I go into my background for this, I want to make a preface to my remarks. One of the first hearings you scheduled, a bipartisan hearing, was on the issue of anti-Semitism. There were some members of your side of the aisle who said it was their feeling we didn't put enough emphasis on it, and they wanted to start the hearing on anti-Semitism. We happily joined in that effort, and I think we had one common voice condemning anti-Semitism and all of its efforts that are underway around this country, sadly, at this moment. Why does that have anything to do with Mr. Martin as the U.S. Attorney for the Washington, D.C.? Prior to his appointment as interim U.S. Attorney, Mr. Martin made appalling attacks against federal prosecutors and associated himself with individuals who clearly present a threat to our nation. Mr. Martin was a leader of the so-called Stop the Steal movement to illegally overturn the 2020 election. He was physically on the grounds of the U.S. Capitol on January 6, but he has repeatedly dismissed or downplayed the violence perpetrated against 140 members of law enforcement in this Capitol on that day. Those of us who were here on January 6 know the truth. The brutal attacks on these policemen and other law enforcement is unprecedented. But listen to how Mr. Martin, who wants to be the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, described January 6th. He posted on social media, and I quote, "Like Mardi Gras in D.C. today, love, faith, and joy, ignore fake news," end of quote. Equally alarming, he has called for, quote, "less judgment for somebody who hit a cop," close quote, during the January 6th attack. This is Ed Martin, who wants to be the chief prosecutor for the District of Columbia. This is an outrageous statement for anyone to make, but even more so for someone who's been nominated to be the lead prosecutor for the Department of Justice here in our capital city. Mr. Martin's attack on law enforcement don't stop there. He called federal prosecutors in every office he now seeks to lead, quote, terrorist, he said, for pursuing stiff sentences against violent January 6 offenders. Now I want to talk about one specific relationship that I think we need to know a lot more about. Mr. Martin also needs to answer for his extensive ties to Timothy Hale Cuccinelli, a January 6th offender with a long and vile record as a Nazi sympathizer. Mr. Martin not only has portrayed Mr. Hale Cuccinelli as a victim of an unjust conviction, Mr. Martin has also repeatedly praised Mr. Hale Cuccinelli's character, despite Cuccinelli's extensive, well-known history of anti-Semitism, misogyny, and racism. Mr. Hale Cuccinelli once said, and I quote, "Hitler should have finished the job," close quote. He also claimed he would, quote, "kill all Jews and eat them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and he wouldn't need to season them because the salt from their tears would make it flavorful enough," end of quote. Days after the January 6th attack, he was recorded saying that he wished for another civil war and that he would give Jewish people, quote, 24 hours to leave the country. This is Mr. Hale Cuccinelli. At his sentencing hearing, Judge Trevor McFadden, appointed by President Trump, said, and I quote, "statements and actions like his," Cuccinelli's, "make Jewish people less safe and less confident they can participate as equal members of our society." After all of that happened last year, Mr. Martin, who wants to be the chief prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice in Washington, Mr. Martin presented Mr. Hale Cuccinelli with an award. Where was the award given? At the Trump Bedminster Club in New Jersey. At that club, Mr. Martin said that Cuccinelli was, quote, "an extraordinary man, an extraordinary leader." Since January 20th, Mr. Martin has served as interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, and since the beginning days, he's abused that position. One of his first official acts of office as acting U.S. Attorney was to shut down the section of the U.S. Attorney's Office handling January 6 cases and fire a number of assistant attorneys simply because they were assigned to prosecute January 6 defendants. Before Mr. Martin's appointment, he represented 3 January 6 defendants as criminal defense counsel. He then later failed to withdraw his representation of 2 of these defendants before taking action as interim U.S. Attorney benefiting his clients. We raised this question with the D.C. Bar. He's gone so far as to turn the U.S. Attorney's Office into the personal law firm for the president and his unelected co-president, Elon Musk, threatening to prosecute various government employees, members of Congress, and press outlets in an attempt to chill their lawful speech. In February of this year, Mr. Martin tweeted to Mr. Musk the following: "If people are discovered to have broken the law or even acted simply unethically, we will investigate them," Mr. Martin said, "and we will chase them to the end of the earth to hold them accountable," an assurance he gave to Elon Musk. And Mr. Martin stayed true to his words. Among other actions, he's intervened to assist Doge in its efforts to break into the U.S. Institute of Peace. Finally, Mr. Martin has attempted to hide his record from this committee and the American people. He has failed to provide a number of required disclosures to the committee. Nearly 1,000 hours of podcasts are no longer available on online platforms, such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts, interfering with our ability to thoroughly examine his record. Mr. Martin is a nominee whose problematic record deserves additional scrutiny by this committee. Don't take it from me. Listen to 100 former assistant U.S. attorneys from across this political spectrum who worked in the office of the District of Columbia. They sent the committee a letter in it they noted that they personally had, quote, "served no political agenda, no political party, and no political figure. We served justice as we were expected to and as the generations before us did." They urged this committee to hold a public hearing, noting that Mr. Martin has done things that, quote, "typify authoritarian and indeed totalitarian regimes of the most monstrous sort." These former prosecutors added that Mr. Martin's, quote, "evident partisanship raises serious questions about whether he'll perform the duties of U.S. Attorney without fear or favor as required." Mr. Chairman, we gathered together on this side of the aisle to ask for Mr. Martin to appear before the committee and to testify under oath. This situation with Hale Cusinelli, where such a man, outrageous man, has said some terrible things, and I haven't recounted them all, should be given an award by the man who wants to be the chief prosecutor for the District of Columbia. We owe it to the American people not to sweep this under the rug and not to ignore it. And so I ask you if you will give us this opportunity of Mr. Martin testifying under oath.
Before answering your question, my answer is going to be based upon practice of this committee as I understand it, at least for the last 40 years. I don't want what I'm saying to be interpreted as disagreeing with anything you described about this individual. Yeah, okay, about this individual. Because my staff is vetting him, and what you've heard is relatively new to me. So let me say this, based on the practice that we've had, and we've had controversial USDAs before this committee before, our practice is, at least in the last 40 years, never to have a hearing. So at this point, I'm going to take the position of not having a hearing because we are going to follow the usual process that any questions that any members want to submit outside of having a public hearing in writing to these, we'll make sure that you get the answers to your questions, and that's the way we've done it on other controversial U.S. attorneys.
If I can respond.
Please do.
I believe that your members on the Republican side of the aisle will be as outraged and embarrassed by this background as any member on the Democratic side of the aisle. I would like to use the next few days to appeal to them personally to join us in asking for this hearing so that it's a bipartisan effort. We all join together on the question of anti-Semitism. I think we can stand together on this as well. So if we have not reached an agreement to hold a hearing by the next meeting of this Judiciary Committee, I'm going to ask for an official vote of the members of the committee on that question.
I appreciate that. And if I can facilitate meetings on it, I'll be glad to do that. But I think I want to stick with precedent because we could be having a lot of U.S. attorney hearings, and since we haven't in the past, I don't want to change the precedent that's been around most of the time that I know about.
I have a statement on the patent bills before us, but I'll withhold that until we completed this conversation.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I add a brief comment on the matter that the
Please.
chairman the ranking
Yes.
member just raised?